Okay, so here we are back at cookcheap.org, where obviously we cook even when we look pretty bad. I'm going to make something with lentils and rice today and show you how to use some of the rice and lentils that we've already cooked. And the other ingredient to this dish is basically onions. I got 3 big onions here, and I'm just going to chop them up. Okay, this onion is not good in the center. You can see that that brown ring is not what you'd want to eat. So I have to make a choice about whether I have another onion that I think I can make work, or whether I want to take the good parts away and just use the good parts and throw away the bad parts. Because onions come in rings, usually the bad parts are just related to 1 or 2 rings, and you can use the rest of the onion. Okay, so close up of this onion. I cut off the ends. Like that. I take off the skin, which I usually can get separated from that first cut. I don't usually take a lot of time on this, so if it's not coming off for me, I'll cut it off. And then I cut down through it this way. 2 halves of the onion, and then North Pole to South Pole I cut. And then I think this wastes the least amount of onion but goes the quickest. My eyes are already watering like faucets, so I certainly don't want to drag this out. And by cutting it that way, I cut across the skin in making little dice, and when it cooks, you know, each one of these pieces is going to fall apart into its own little sections. These onions are really strong. My eyes are watering like faucets. It is sulfuric acid that the onions are releasing when you break their cell walls. So if you feel you're like in warfare, you are. You want to cut down on the teariness while you're going. You can rinse everything in a little cool water. Alright, now that looks like a ton of onions. It's actually going to cook down a little, but that's part of the reason why this dish is so good. Very nutritious, not at all spicy. And the primary vegetable content is the onions. So I'm going to put a load of olive oil in there and cook these babies down. If you add salt to sauteing vegetables like this, you're going to pull out the moisture. So you have to decide whether you want to pull the moisture out or not, whether you want to leave it in for some reason. I'm going to go ahead and salt these. And I'm just going to cook them for a bit. I know it looks like a ton of onions, but honestly, you are going to be amazed at how this cooks down. A ton of onions! Ancient Egyptian workers used to live basically on lentils and onions, and you can too. So I don't think it came through on the video, but I did just add some pepper to this. It's really mild. But we're not going to season this with almost anything except pepper, salt, and some apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar goes really well with this for some reason. Brings out any flavor. This is just going to take maybe 5-10 minutes to cook down. So while these onions are cooking, I want to talk about that bad onion. I used to be just as squeamish as anybody about bad ingredients, and I probably would have originally cut that onion open and said, ew, it's bad, I'm not going to use it anymore. But you know what? If everything in your kitchen represents the $1 that you had to shell out for some food, you probably don't want to be throwing things away at the drop of a hat. Most of the onion is perfectly good. It just went bad in this one little strip. So try not to be too squeamish about it, especially with vegetables. You can cut off the bad parts and use the rest, and it's perfectly fine. So I'm cooking this in a fairly high temperature, and I have to watch it and stir it. Some of the edges are getting a little brown, and I love that. That is so delicious, the part that's getting brown, but you don't want it to burn. You have two choices. You can turn it down a little bit, and you don't have to watch it so closely, or you just have to stay in the kitchen and stir it every once in a while. Make sure all of it's getting cooked. Don't let any of the edges escape you and get burnt. Just make sure all of it keeps getting stirred. Okay, you can cook for this recipe without any spices at all, but I just looked at the original recipe again from a friend of mine, and it asked for a little cumin, which is sort of this smoky spice that's really popular in Middle Eastern and Chinese and Mexican cooking. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that and stir it in. If you are going to cook with spices, you need to do it at this stage where things are getting exposed to high heat, because that cooks the spices, and you want them to be thoroughly cooked before you sort of finish everything off. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you need to add spices while you're still cooking things. I'm going to turn this heat down because it's getting done a little quicker than I want, but it's getting perfect. Just brown and yummy and delicious. Okay, so here's the finished dish. Got my beautifully cooked onions. They're just gorgeous and brown. This bowl is super hot, so I just heated it up, but I have some leftover rice here. That's brown rice. You can use white or brown rice. And I just dump that in, about 3/4 to a cup, whatever you've got. This is a great way to use up a little bit of leftover rice. Stir that in. And cooked lentils. These are the lentils from the lentil recipe that you already saw me post. Put those in. Woo! It's like a big cold wad of lentils. Alright. Break them up. Mix them in. And maybe I should have used a bigger pan for this, but that's alright. I'll just go gently. And I'm going to cook until the lentils get heated through, and then I'm going to serve this, and it really is delicious. And you might think when you saw that big pile of onions that it's way too many onions. Promise you, it's totally not. This is just yummy food. Super cheap, super nutritious, very tasty, and you could serve it with a green salad if you wanted to make a nice meal for anybody who is coming over to your house. Lots of protein. Just good. I'm going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar, like I said, for flavor. Just a splash, like a tablespoon. And then you can serve it with a little more vinegar if people want to add that on, or Worcestershire sauce. I promise you this is really very bland, this dish. Nobody's ever going to turn this dish down because it's too spicy. So that's mujadarn. Or mujadara. Mujadarn.